The US President Donald Trump has ended a summit with the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-Un, saying sometimes you just have to walk away. The summit had been aimed at trying to get Pyongyang to give up its nuclear weapons program, but Kim insisted that all American sanctions against his country be lifted. Trump spoke in public about why he was leaving the summit early.
But we literally just left. We spent pretty much all day with Kim Jong-Un, who is he's quite a guy and quite a character, and I think our relationship is very strong. But at this time, we had some options, and at this time we decided not to do any of the options, and we'll see where that goes. But it was a very interesting 2 days, and I think actually it was a very productive 2 days, but sometimes you have to walk. Basically, they wanted the sanctions lifted in their entirety, and we couldn't do that. So they were willing to denuke a large portion of the areas that we wanted, but we couldn't give up all of the sanctions for that. So we continue to work, and we'll see, but we had to walk away from that. He has a certain vision, and it's not exactly our vision, but it's a lot closer than it was a year ago. And I think, eventually we'll get there. But for this particular visit, we decided that we had to walk, and we'll see what happens.
That's the US President Donald Trump speaking this today. Sherwin Bryce-Pease is our correspondent standing by for us in New York. Sherwin, it's evening here. Good morning to you there. What do we know about why Trump and Kim broke this off?
Well, essentially, Kim Jong-Un said that he would dismantle the most important nuclear weapons site that they have in the DPRK in return for the lifting of international sanctions, and that was a bridge too far for the United States. Stephen, you and I will know that when you have these geopolitical summits, whether you're talking about the G7 or the G20, negotiators go ahead of the principals, right? You have what you call Sherpas who negotiate the outcomes of these summits, and for all intents and purposes, they had people on the ground in Vietnam. Certainly, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, had made a number of trips to the DPRK to sort of lay the groundwork for this final summit moment, and it all fell apart at the end because they had not negotiated the final outcome. This was left to the deal maker in chief, and unfortunately this appears to have fallen apart here at the last minute. I just want to read you the synopsis from the New York Times as to how this kind of played out in the last moments of the summit. Confusion reigned, they say, in the International Media Center. What was happening? Hundreds of reporters frantically looked for an explanation or a statement from the White House. Once Mr. Trump's motorcade left the Metropole Hotel, it was clear that the deal was off. At the press center, mild mayhem broke out when reporters from a Japanese news network started interviewing a reporter from the Voice of America, a news agency funded by the United States government. A crowd of journalists swarmed the VOA reporter, assuming that he was a government official. At one point, a reporter who joined the scrum realized that it was just a case of hacks interviewing one another. Said the reporter, "You're just journalists. Oh my God, why did I run over here?" So I understand that there was supposed to be a luncheon after initial meetings early this morning in Hanoi. The luncheon didn't happen. There's food waiting on the table, but the principals did not enter the room to sit down and eat.
Okay, so Sherwin, it clearly didn't go according to the script. We're talking about two countries that are still technically at war. They have been since the 1950s. Are there other talks, other summits planned? Have they broken it off permanently, or is this just maybe a bad day?
Well, as the president famously always says, Stephen, we'll see what happens, right? Essentially, there was supposed to be a third summit. In fact, after the Singapore summit last year, there was actually talk of Kim Jong-un coming to Washington, D.C. for a summit that would be hosted at the White House. But, of course, that didn't play very well politically, domestically, and, of course, it was we were in the sort of election season last year, so that wasn't going to fly. And so the compromise of a neutral venue in Vietnam was decided upon. But I think American taxpayers members, certainly opposition politicians and lawmakers in this country, are going to begin to ask questions about the cost involved here, right? If you really understand how the United States president travels, he travels with a lot of a huge entourage, a lot of equipment, a lot of machinery, a great deal of protection. That costs a lot of money, in addition to the expense of media houses that sent their correspondents and their camera people and their video editors for their live positions. I mean, this is a very expensive exercise when the President of the United States travels, certainly to a far-flung country like Vietnam. So I think there are going to be questions about what are we getting out of these summits based on the amount of money that is being spent on them. And I think the clear answer right now is not very much.
So, Sherwin, I mean, all of that was happening in Vietnam last night our time. Also last night our time in Washington, D.C., Michael Cohen, Trump's former attorney, he was giving testimony. Let's actually look at some of what was being said in that testimony last night.
I am ashamed that I chose to take part in concealing Mr. Trump's illicit acts rather than listening to my own conscience. I am ashamed because I know what Mr. Trump is. He is a racist, he is a con man, and he is a cheat.
Well, dramatic testimony coming through last night, Joe, and I mean a huge talking point around the world. What does this do for the probes into Trump, though? I mean, legally, which I suppose is probably what's going to matter here. What implications from that testimony?
Well, legally speaking, a sitting president of the United States cannot be indicted while in office. So, you know, these crimes perhaps could be archived, and he would have to face them certainly in a criminal procedure post his presidency. So this is a question about impeachment, right? This is a political question, and so this bar that members of Congress have to weigh up. The phrase is high crimes and misdemeanors, and whether the crimes the lawmakers believe the president has committed here are worth an impeachment process. Of course, the very high bar that would have to be overcome in the Senate is that you would have to get a two-thirds majority to convict the president in a senatorial trial, because essentially that's where the impeachment process starts in the House, and then the conviction has to be upheld in the Senate. And of course, you need a two-thirds majority for that to happen. And of course, Republicans that have been very reluctant to go up against this president are certainly in the majority there. But what we have discovered from Michael Cohen's testimony are three clear areas that lawmakers will be focusing on. He lied. Michael Cohen has admitted that he lied to Congress in previous testimony at the behest of Donald Trump about the president's continued business dealings in Russia while he was running for president of the United States in 2016. This at a time when Trump himself was publicly denying that he had any Russian business dealings with Russia. So the question is, why was the president being obfuscating that relationship? Another thing we learned is that he confirmed the hush payments made to Stormy Daniels, the adult film star, of $130,000. He says the president was party to that. He instructed him to do this. He was directing the payment of that hush money. Of course, this is, of course, a campaign finance violation, but as I've indicated, the president cannot be indicted while in office, but it does speak to the character of this president. He also spoke about the hacked emails. Of course, there was a big question about whether the Trump campaign was aware that WikiLeaks was going to release these hacked emails from the Democratic National Committee that would show Hillary Clinton, the opposition candidate at the time, in a bad light. The president had denied this. The campaign had denied that they had prior knowledge to WikiLeaks releasing this. Cohen came out in testimony in front of the Oversight Committee yesterday saying that the president did know about those hacked emails before they were released.
Sherwin Bryce-Pease, thank you very much indeed on the line there from the United States, from New York. Tsepiso Mokwetla has, of course,